Jump right in and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to those in New England in the Northeast, or for those impacted by the storm. I hope everybody is warm and safe, and welcome. I am extremely excited to be able to spend the next hour with you all. I can't thank you enough for making the time and carving time out of your day. This is truly going to be what I promise to be a very powerful, a very timely, and a very meaningful conversation about something that I know is near and dear to all of us, and that is leadership. And how we as leaders can show up each and every day in our very rapidly changing environment, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's from business, no matter what sector you're in. I don't think anybody would argue the fact that we are experiencing incredibly challenging and changing times. And it's now more important than ever that as leaders, we show up and be present to garner trust and to really lead with a legacy and have a true impact on our respective communities, the people we serve, and those that we lead. I see a lot of familiar faces out there today, but for those who don't know me, my name is Scott Wolf. I am a physician executive and a certified leadership coach, and the honored and new author of a newly released book called Reflections in Practice, a practical guide for transformational leadership. And it's just been an honor and a privilege to go through that journey of bringing those writings together, in which we're going to build this conversation around today. I have been very, very fortunate throughout my career. I've gone from the bedside as a practicing physician to the boardroom and the honor of serving in leadership roles in the C-suite of organizations. And I've had a few steps along the way as well. And I've been blessed with many, many mentors. But it's one thing that I've learned is that leadership is not about titles. It's not about the name on a door, but it's about presence. It's about purpose. And it's about the impact that we all can have on the lives of those we serve and those we walk together with. I am absolutely honored and thrilled to be joined by two extraordinary individuals who share that passion for leadership and who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to this conversation. First is Kristen Collins, who I affectionately refer to as CC. I have been blessed with her friendship for years. Kristen is a global thought leader and a well-being advocate whose work inspires individuals, organizations across the country and globally to help people reconnect with authenticity and with purpose. I am also incredibly honored. I am incredibly humbled and most of all privileged to have with us and someone I call not only a colleague, but as a friend, and that's Dr. Robert Navy Bob Ronska. To know Bob is to love him, but I really want you to understand where Bob comes from. Navy Bob, Dr. Bob, is a retired United States Navy captain and the former commanding officer for the United States Nuclear Submarine Fleet. You talk about leading under pressure. And he's also the founder of Leading with Love, a leadership philosophy that really weaves trust and compassion into high-performing organizations. So the point of today is we're going to come together and we're going to explore how leaders can show up each and every day, can practice that intentional pause, and lead in ways that truly help transform people and systems. We're going to keep this very conversational. We're also going to have some fun along the way, but we're going to be certain to leave time for questions, thoughts, and insights to be shared by all of you. So let's get started. I want to start where I believe all leadership begins, and that's with presence. Because before strategy, before execution, leadership is how we truly show up each and every day. So Kristen, I want to start with you. You often speak about intentional living and the power of presence. So how is it that as you're working with leaders in your respective organizations, how is it that in a world where leaders are expected to have that immediate reaction, that immediate response, they're working on demand, how do leaders help cultivate a presence in a way that they can truly be impactful on the people they serve with?
Well, thank you, Scott, for the question, and thank you for having me as part of this conversation. I was already taking a bunch of notes, and I'm already super inspired just by being in this collective. So thanks for including me. And I can speak to this topic because for the vast majority of my life, I was not present. I was very much ruminating about the past or fretting about a future, which never ended up showing up exactly the way I thought it would anyway. And it was through health scares and being chronically ill that I went through the transformation of understanding a lot of things. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of them this afternoon, but the power of presence and the imperativeness of presence. You end up tripling the amount of work you do when you're not present, if you're not listening. If only I had been more present in college. But think about a time you've worked with a leader that is not present, and what a turnoff that is, and how challenging that is, and how frustrating that is when they're not actually engaged in conversation with you. So I read a really amazing book, and Gail, if possible, if you can look it up and put it in the chat. Ryan Holiday, Stillness is the Key. And that was one of the turnaround moments when I read about a bunch of leaders, including John F. Kennedy, when the Bay of Pigs invasion was happening and he was a new president and he had to make immediate decisions as the leader of our country. And he paused and he listened, and then he went into the Rose Garden and reflected. And the folks around him were panicking. Like, we need direction, we need an answer. How do we respond to that? And that book is full of stories like that that really imprinted upon me the power of the pause and intentionality and deep breath, so that you can really connect with the heck yes, right? And it's through listening and being present with others and not rushing. And yes, sometimes things can happen that are scary or difficult because you didn't take immediate action. But honestly, did you ever slam out one of those emails that you wish you could that you wish you could retract?
Take it back.
So those are my thoughts on intentionality and pausing in leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bob, I'm going to ask you to chime in here. There's nothing like, and I have no idea what it's like, and hopefully you can shed some light, but what it's like to command a nuclear submarine fleet under the most, high stakes environments. So what did you learn from that experience? And again, spend a minute or two to just share with us what that experience is like. But what did you take away from how leaders show up under those environmental circumstances?
So thank you so much, Wolfie and CC. And again, it's such an honor and privilege to be here. And so just want to add on what CC was saying, is that it is so hard to love others if you don't love yourself first. And that is an essential first step. And what I have found is that the most successful organizations happen when they build an environment based on caring, trusting relationships that empower people to just go above and beyond and speak up. And so how I found that is in the most homogeneous environment that has ever existed, the nuclear Navy. Everyone goes through the same schools, everyone uses the same equipment, everyone uses the same procedures. And yet there was such a diverse performance on some submarines compared to the others. Some were knocking it out of the park. Some couldn't get out of their way, and they were having significant issues. And what was the difference that I found throughout my 28 years, and I spent 8 years of my life underwater, was the environment. It wasn't the people. It was the environment that was set. And what was my aha moment in my book, I found that we were behind enemy lines. We were a stone throws away from those capable submarine. $100 million was at stake if you take the cost of the submarine, and our lives were in danger if they would have found us. And I was about to make a bad decision and leave the area based on I thought to be a 95, 99% chance that they had us. But my executive officer spoke up. He saved the day. And it was against all odds. I thought for sure today they had us, but he saw something that I didn't. And that environment empowered him. In fact, we just had dinner together after 20 years of serving together. He was just at my house and I asked him again, I said, Gary, why did you speak up? Why did you risk your career, your reputation? Would have been so much easier to say nothing. And he said, because you would have done it for me. And he said, in my previous command, the one that before I was serving with you, there's no way there would have been a snowball's chance in hell I would have spoke up. And he said, because you built this environment, it allowed me to think. So the aha moment for me was, what was it and what did we do to take the worst submarine to the best submarine and to create this environment? Is it wasn't the people, it was the environment. And what was the key ingredients in this environment? It was caring, trusting relationships. That is not what we teach today. And we teach about psychological safety, these tools for that and that. All that stuff was nonsense unless you have somebody that cares. And we're only having a piece of this, and this is why healthcare needs this today. So that's what I learned. It is about the environment that you set as a leader. It is not about you. And as you said, Wolfie, it's not about your titles.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Bob. And I want to build on that if I can. So stay with me. So if presence, I truly believe that presence is the foundation, right? You as you said, you can't love others until you start loving yourself, and it begins with presence. But if presence is the foundation, then trust is the fuel that causes that progression. Stephen Covey says you can't move at the speed of trust. And without trust, nothing moves. So I want to keep going with you, Bob. Your initiative, Leading with Love, and we've had this conversation, and CC, you and I have had this conversation, that it really challenges the idea that trust and compassion are soft, right? They're those soft characteristics. And, if you walk into a busy CEO's office, I always, CC and I go back and forth. I said, you can't go in to that office and lead with love. But in actuality, you've demonstrated and you've proven that you can, and it's essential. So can you talk a little bit about, like, what does trust look like in the Navy? And how can executives today apply those principles without feeling that it's soft, without feeling that it'll make them vulnerable? Because I think that's really one of a key point of this conversation.
So, Wolfie, I get that all the time. They think that a person who leads with love, people are going to take advantage of them. And all I can say is that they're completely wrong. Here's a guy who carried the nuclear codes, was in charge of a $2 billion nuclear submarine. And love was the thing that made my submarine going from the worst to the best, and it wasn't me. And I have a question for the audience. Do you think that the Navy SEALs are weak? The answer is no. They're the most elite group that you've ever seen. And I had the incredible opportunity to deploy with SEAL Delivery Team 1 while the Lone Survivor movie, if you haven't seen it, was happening in real world. And real quick to recap this, it was Michael Murphy leading this team knowingly after they were surrounded and there was no way out. He went on top of this ridge, the only place that he could make a communication phone call, and he sacrificed his life so that others could be saved. And that's why the movie's called Lone Survivor. So love, if you really want to define it, it is about sacrificing yourself for the benefit of others. And there's no other way to explain what the Navy SEALs are like. I don't care if you call it heart, kindness, relationships, whatever it is, but there's trust and it's based on love. And if you think about the Navy SEALs, do they have standards? Do they have caring accountability? Absolutely. Look at BUDS. 80% of the people that go to BUDS, they fail out because of the standards are so high. Is it because they're weak? No, because they have high standards. So you as a leader, you can lead with love, tough love, and have high standards. And everyone, as long as you communicate what those standards are and have caring accountability, you'll be seen as the greatest leader, and you will be the furthest from being weak of anybody else. So for those that think that it's weak, I couldn't disagree with you more, and there's evidence to back that up.
Thank you so much for that. Cece, let's pivot back to you now. In the same contract of trust, how do leaders rebuild trust once it's damaged or tarnished? How does a leader come around and circle back from your perspective and your teachings? How do they regain that ground?
Sure. What's coming through is authenticity. Um, we're going to have situations where trust is broken, right? And sometimes it's intentional, and sometimes it's by accident. So first and foremost, if a situation arises that I'm responsible for that break in trust, which can happen, and I promise you it's not out of malice, right? But I'm a human. My first is owning it and apologizing for it and asking for forgiveness for it simultaneously, or as well if trust is broken from someone else. Love is not mushy. Love is accountability. Love is compassion and empathy. Love is honesty. Love is transparency, right? And our humanness is going to give us situations that are uncomfortable. That's why it's so hard to be present, because we don't want to feel the discomfort of not feeling like we're in control. So if trust is broken and I break it, it is to own that, to express my sorrow for that and ask for forgiveness of that. But the hardest thing is for me to forgive myself, because I don't want to disappoint anyone. And then again, simultaneously, or uh, in opposition, if someone breaks trust with me, empathy, compassion. And in some cases, that means it is the end of a relationship, or an opportunity to work with someone. And that can be the case too. So again, it's not a soft skill that you're like, oh, it's okay, I'm a doormat. No, it's holding people accountable as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing, and what I'm hearing is that it's really a strategic asset.
It definitely is a strategic asset. It also is being. It is just being. And I think as leaders, we're going to be disappointed and hurt and need strategies to be able to lead organizations. Yet when you're showing up present and from that place of wholeness, comfortable with who you are and why you are, and understanding that everyone that you're in community with is going to be either slightly or grossly different from you, right? Then trust will be broken. I promise you, even in the best marriage ever, right? That there are moments where trust will be broken. So, empathy, compassion, authentic communication, forgiveness, and sometimes the end of that chapter.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go back to you again on this topic of trust, because I want to try to leave the folks with some practical pointers. You write in your book a process that you adopted called Crew Top 3. And I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and how do leaders today maybe apply the foundational principles of Crew Top 3 to what they do.
So absolutely, Wolfie, is that when I was about to take that USS Texas, when I took command and underneath the North Pole and certify that ship for Arctic operations, people were walking around like robots. There was no love. There was just apathy of just doing things to do things. And there was no critical thinking. So we had a major incident, and you can relate this to a code 15 in a hospital system. And my boss came down and just started yelling at me and saying, you're all messed up. This ship is, and I was in command for like a month, and I started looking in the mirror, and I said, what am I doing? I'm about to take this ship underneath the North Pole, never done before. The lives and risks are just immense. And I really started questioning, what am I doing? But I relied on my training from previous commanding officers, grooms, and instead of following the playbook that is taught to hold people accountable with fear and just punish them and hold them accountable for not looking at myself in the mirror first. The thing that I ask myself is, what training am I not giving them? What is it, resources I'm not providing? And what culture am I setting? Before I can start holding people accountable, I need to know this to make sure that I am not doing this because I'm the root cause. So I started this thing called the crew top three. It was something simple. All I did was ask each crew member, starting, top side. I said, "Tell me your top three concerns." It doesn't. It can be anything. And the things I found, Dr. Wolf, was just amazing. And I'll give you one example. There wasn't enough computers. Half the computers were broken on the ship, what entailed each sailor had to stay on board an additional 2 hours of extra time because the command was not providing the computers, that they couldn't be with their families. Not because there was extra work, it's just that we didn't provide the resources necessary. So that light bulb went off. No wonder why the crew was walking around like robots. They didn't care. They were just apathetic because they didn't care for the ship. Why didn't they care for the ship? Because the ship didn't care for them. Why would I care for an organization that can't even give me computers where it's allowing me to spend 2 hours extra on board waiting for computers that I couldn't be with my loved ones when we're already going to be, spending 6 months underway on a submarine? The light bulb went off. I immediately fixed the computers, got new ones, and I said, "I'm sorry, I love you. This will never happen again." If you want to back that up with the research, and that was the spark that changed the culture that I talked about, Gary speaking up and getting that environment. The process was simple. We started building caring, trusting relationships first. And if you look at the evidence base, McKinsey came out in an article in 2021 talking about the great resignation. And the number one reason why this generation is leaving the workforce is because they don't feel valued. So this crew top three, what it does, it makes people feel valued, it makes them feel heard, and it makes them feel like they're not present, that they're part of this team. And and then what it also does, it provides transparency. Never again was it going to get caught off guard to make sure we didn't have computers and that drift was happening. And the third thing it did, it provided a mental gym of having people speak up, and that really helped Gary to do that at the end. So this is based on evidence based, and I'll talk about Dr. George Grain later, building relationships based on 50 years. So you can adopt this crew top three today. You can, and it is something as simple of asking your team members, what are your top three concerns every month? And then following up on what those are. And a lot of times you'll find they're easy things you can fix. And what it does, it really shows that you care for them, which is so much more important than and then spending money on computers to get fixed. So the crew top three is something that we really utilize, and I guarantee you that is something you can use, and that really turned around this $2 billion nuclear submarine.
Thank you for sharing that. And again, extremely practical that you can roll out regardless of the vertical that we're in. So far we have presence, we have trust. I want to transition into another important area, and that's purpose, right? I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, a fan of what is your why? And I truly believe that purpose connects people to their commitment, to their engagement, because they become owners, not renters, right? They have a purpose, they have a why. So Kristen, coming back to you, your message is all about connecting with purpose. And so how do you, when you work with organizations around the country, what is your message to having leaders help them not only connect to their purpose, but how do you get them to get their organization to rally around a true north, the organizational why? Can you give us some practical steps and your message around that when you're talking to leaders across the country? What does that look like?
I love that question. Yeah, and it's really interesting that when I left corporate and I have been out on my own for the past 6 years, that's exactly what I do. Is I'm welcomed into organizations, whether it's for an hour or in some cases, almost 6 years now, where I'm listening to the why. And it is challenging in a silo or a void to be able to know who you are and why you are. It took me a lot of partnerships and many different conversations to understand who I am and why I am and what my purpose is. It was quite an exercise, and it took a couple of years for me to connect with. But now I show up individually knowing who I am and why I am, and I'm comfortable in my own skin, and also understanding I'm not for everyone. So when I enter a conversation with an organization, particularly the leader, I'm listening. Who are they? Why are they? What is their point? And how are they connecting with their community or community in general from that place of wholeness? And it's really interesting. Some cases I've worked with startups that are just starting to get their articulation and their cadence. In one current group that I work with, I call them my 53-year-old startup because they're still connecting with who they are and why they are. So for folks who are part of our collective conversation, how is that implemented? If you wanted to bring that into an organization, first and foremost, it's asking the question, who are we? You know, and we could say, what's our mission statement? What's our value statement? We can be technical like that. That's fine. I'm much less formal than that. And I just have conversations with diverse key members of an organization to find out who the organization is and why they are. And then I compilate that. I kind of whiteboard it, you know, and I compilate what I've heard. And then I present it back to them for them to react to. I listen to X amount of people on the board, X amount of people who are supporters of an organization, who are leaders in the organization, who are, all different levels within the organization, and then provide it back and be like, this is what I heard. What are your thoughts? And then it's a continual revisit. It's a continual tweaking, but every decision when I'm working within an organization, every decision that I make, every KPI, every financial decision, every marketing decision is based on, is this who we are? Is this why we are? Is this why we're in existence? And if it's not in alignment, then we don't do it.
So I just want to pick up on something you just said that resonated, because you actually mentioned very practical outcomes, right? Because especially in healthcare, we are very outcome oriented, right? We're on quality outcomes, on financial outcomes, on operational outcomes. So just talk a little bit more about how do you connect what you just talked about as far as the why to those very practical outcomes, because they actually do go hand in hand.
They absolutely do. And so for any organization, whether it is healthcare or a nonprofit or a for-profit, it doesn't matter. Practically, when every breath, when every decision is based on that lens, you can measure those outcomes. So whether within healthcare, it's patient safety, or it's your finances, or it's your employee engagement. Let's just take employee engagement as one. Are we, because we know, and probably everybody in this conversation knows, that employee engagement is foundational and key to the success of a healthcare system and the services that it provides. So walking down employee engagement, are the employees embodying who the organization is and why it is? Right butts in right seats. Maybe this isn't the organization for them. Maybe the role is not for them. So listening and asking, not telling, but listening and asking, and crew top threeing, as Navy Bob said, so that employee knows that they're part of that why in the organization, knowing that they matter. And if they don't, then again, it's a healthy dose of a conversation. Maybe this isn't the right fit for you. When I was so blessed to run a very large team within a healthcare organization where I got to meet you, I took on a team of 100, and their employee engagement scores was under 40%. I was like, whoa, it's kind of like you, Bob, when you took over the summary, right? And I listened. We made a whiteboard of who we were, why we were, where we wanted to go, how we wanted to get there, who was responsible for those tasks, in what amount of time would we want to execute that. And every Monday we huddled around that board and we looked, is that still a priority? Is that person still the right person to lead this? Where are we at with that? Is it the right time? And we'd move it over or take it off or mark it as complete. Within 6 months, that group had a 98% employee engagement.
Fantastic.
I didn't do anything magical. So then how does that tie to patient, experience, patient outcomes, the financials? We all know it 100% aligns with all of that. And one last thought, and this really resonated, Navy Bob, when you were sharing. It's listening, it's showing I heard you. We need computers. We need this, we need that. Also, if we can't provide it, looping back and being like, I heard you. And, unfortunately at this time, it's not in the budget. Or in one case, I found out that it was not a HIPAA violation, but it was kind of a HIPAA violation. So I went back to the person who shared the idea and I was like, I thought it was a great idea, but we can't do it. And this is why. And they were like, no way. I never thought of that. So the power of listening and then looping back, provides that opportunity for all to align with the purpose, right? But not always ideas are able to be implemented.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. That follow through and that closing the loop is incredibly important. Bob, I'm going to go back to you. Mission is everything in the Navy, right? I mean, every ounce of energy is dedicated to the mission, but similarly in healthcare, right? Our mission, our true north, is around patient care, and I know that you are equally passionate and bring expertise in the field of quality and patient safety, and you've dedicated a good amount of your time to working with health systems in that context. So, in the same sort of topic as we're talking about with connecting with why and purpose, can you sort of extrapolate your experiences in the submarine, in the Naval Command, and bringing that forward to quality and safety in a healthcare environment? Because it's something so incredibly important today. And unfortunately, and I think those that are in the healthcare field would say that we're really not making the progress that we had hoped. There was that Sentinel article years and years ago coming out of the Institute of Medicine about the quality chasm. And when you think about when that was written to today, and I look to you to validate, our progress has been less than desired. So can you help us connect the dots between your experience as a naval commander and applying that to health systems around quality and safety, and that why, the purpose around patient care?
So Wolfie, I love it. Yes. And so for the audience, the reason why I'm here in healthcare is that Dr. Coleman, after I was getting out of the Navy after 28 years, he said, why don't you come work in healthcare? And Dr. Coleman used to be the physician to the president, now is the chief quality safety officer at Advent Health. And I said, I have no clinical background. I said, why would I work in healthcare? He says, we need you. He talks about the 1999, the first report out, 90,000 people die every year due to medical errors. And this is not people that, are going to die anyways. These are people due to medical errors going to the hospital, 1 in 10 chance dying. That latest statistic is up to 240 John Hopkins in 2018. That is 400 people dying every day in the hospital that shouldn't. And yet we're pouring, I just saw an article for IHI, like PDSAs, all this stuff. Yes, it's moving the bar, but it's clearly not enough. So why are we using the same playbook? So they wanted to go to the nuclear Navy, the most reliable organization for over 75 years to never have a reactor accident, with 20-year-old sailors operating these highly enriched nuclear reactors. They never went to the nuclear Navy. And so Dr. Coleman and I wrote a book. It's called High Reliability Healthcare. And what we did was share the secrets of the nuclear Navy. But Dr. Wolf, the real secret, as I'm digging in and researching and so forth, there are some best kept secrets in here. Yes, they will do better than PDSAs, some of them and so forth. But the key ingredient for any culture is, one, you have to build caring, trusting relationships that create an environment of empowerment. Then you got to tell people what are the standards and how do you hold them a caring accountability. And lastly, just like you talked about, the last piece is purpose. What is your purpose on a submarine? What is your purpose in healthcare? And what is your purpose in life? And so as I was listening to CC, exactly all three of us, what we're doing, we're bottling this up instead of like, this is my good old boy, the way I did it. We're developing actual practical tools based on evidence-based to be able to do that. And Crew Top 3 was one of many. And I just want to share one last thing why I know we're on the right track. is Dr. Grain, if you look him up, the father of leader-member exchange, the number one relationship-based theory. When I got my doctorate at Rollins, he's a legend in the academic world. His theory is taught at Harvard, Yale, you name it. And he became my mentor for over 5 years. And before he died, six months ago, he gave me his life's work. He wanted me to carry on his legacy. And so when CC, you talk about how do you do that, exactly what you're doing. And I asked the audience, do you have a playbook when you do one-on-ones with your team? Do you ask them what their purpose is? And how often do you do that? Because it changes in 6, 12 months. Somebody changes, like it's about money, it's about family, it's about career. You as a leader, you're not there to get promoted for yourself. You're there to take care of the people that you're leading, to build your community, make a difference, and put people first. And Mr. Rogers has this wonderful saying, people, love and then success, which means you put love first, your people first, success will follow. Those that put money, their title first, they're limited. And this is based on over 50 years of academic research that shows if you ask people what their purpose is, what their barriers are, and if you there's ungodly amounts of research with LMX that show that an incremental effort that you do by doing that and building relationships, your outcomes will go 100 times, 1,000 times more than if you do an incremental change in yourself. It is about building caring relationships and building that foundation of empowering people to build an environment. That is the key secrets of the nuclear Navy. Yes, there's some great secrets in here, expectations with the pillars of high reliability, but that foundation is the starting point for anything, because no one will care how much you know until they know how much you care. You can tell them to do a PDSA every day or run chart or whatever. If they know you don't care, they'll do it whenever you're looking. So those leaders that are out there, that are aspiring, the first step is to build these caring, trusting relationships. That's what I found in the nuclear Navy.
Oh, Scott, can I layer on that real quick?
Please do.
So I'm so inspired, and I loved all the hearts that were showing up on my computer. Navy Bob, yes, right? So when I took over that team, it was about 100 employees, and I was asking them, so, what is where do you want to go? What is your, what would bring you joy? What is your journey? Out of the 100, there were only two that didn't look at me like I was crazy. They're like, I don't get the question. What's the question? And I'm like, so like, what would you like to grow into? What are your hopes and dreams? And they were so busy, working within their own current environment that they didn't sit to really connect with their purpose. The two that had somewhat connected, and I supported that, I helped them, right? And they were so grateful for that opportunity to grow. But the other 98, or however many that there were, one of the strongest ties in a relationship is when you hold space for someone to actually discover something about themselves. When I'm in conversation and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was inside of me. Or an organization that I'm supporting goes, oh my gosh, I'm getting clarity about who we are and why we are. They become raving fans of your leadership, right? Instead of you pounding and layering your needs on them when you're holding space for them to self-discover, nothing is more authentic and bonding. I had to say.
So couldn't have said it any better, CC. Go ahead, Bob.
So again, I'd like to add on that. And CC, I just got a rhetorical question. Before I ask the rhetorical question, Dr. Grain's watershed article, it's called A Relationship-Based Approach to Leadership. And in there, it's one of the best, it's the most cited articles of all time in the Leadership Quarterly. And in there, it has two components. One, we think leadership is all about the leader. And if you look at the articles that are cited out there, 80% of the articles that are written is about how you as a leader can improve yourself. And if you look at leadership for the last 5,000 years, that leadership theory that has been taught is the great man theory. You have to, do as I say, don't ask questions. This is the culture that's in healthcare. And people perceive that's the culture in the military, and it's not. And so what he determined is that leadership is a 3-dimension phase. It is about you, which is important, like you said. but it is about the person. What is their purpose? How do you best put them in the seat that's best for them and the organization? And it makes them thrive because they love what they're doing. And the last thing is about the relationships so that you can build these caring, trusting relationships. And that's your environment where people will do more, they will say more, and they will be part of the team. And that's where he has this watershed thing and relationships take a thing. So the rhetorical question that I want to end with, and again, this is a rhetorical question. I teach at the University of Central Florida leadership and equality and safety. Where do we teach this relationship building, which is so important and is the critical piece of any organization? The answer is, I don't think we do. And so that is what we're doing, is not giving you these stories of going to submarines and so forth. We are bottling this up to give a playbook so that you in any organization can build this environment where you become a legendary leader. You will have legendary, incredible outcomes, and you will build a field of dreams model where people will be coming to you and not to them. And I will close with this. This is just so remarkable to me that I just, it's an epiphany in the last year, is that the longest study that has ever existed, we talked about this earlier, for 85 years, a Harvard longitudinal study, they asked and they researched people what made people leave a good life. The number one thing, both emotionally, physically, mentally, the most important thing was relationships. And that could be at home, that could be at work, it could be in the environment. As long as you had relationships, if that makes you a good life, makes you live longer, empowers your team, makes them better, makes joy at work, again, the rhetorical question, why aren't we teaching this in our academic institutions or our organizations? I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to redefine leadership worldwide.
Amen.
And the most important relationship has to be the relationship you have with yourself. You have to know who you are. You have to like yourself. You have to forgive yourself so you can show up authentically and not need right from someone else. And that is what we don't teach, is how to heal, know who we are, and love that. Every minute of every day, I'm making decisions. Is
So
that action or those words who
this
I
is
want
why
to
you're
be?
this is why you're so brilliant, because you said it best. You can't love others or lead with love until you love yourself first. You have to be loved to do that. And that is why this sequence of taking care of yourself first, and then you could take others. That's why you get on the airplane. They said, put your mask on first and then put it on your child. You have to take care of yourself first before you can start developing relationships so that you can help others with their purpose. And that's why I think that this framework that we have is just going to be redefining the leadership worldwide.
I couldn't have said it any better. This is exactly what I was hoping this conversation would be. So as we round into the last few minutes, I do want to remind the audience that we will be taking questions. So please post your questions in the chat, and our wonderful moderator Gail will be tracking them and opening it up. The last piece that I just want you both to touch upon, and the title of my book, Reflection and Practice, was intentionally so because it reflection is more than just introspection. Reflection is a discipline. It's about that pause. It's about the discipline to not react. And sometimes it's equally important what we don't say as it is what we do say as leaders. And so I'd like both of you, and Bob, maybe we'll start with you. What does reflection look like to you? And again, to leave our group with some practical guidance, how do you advise those to reflect, to exercise the discipline of reflection?
So, so Dr. Wolf, I would say start with yourself, as CC talked about. You have to take care of yourself. And so, again, when you wake up in the morning, have time to do a journal, reflect on yourself, and do those habits that she was talking about. Because why this is so important, if you look at the state of healthcare today, right now we have 400 people dying every day in the healthcare. and that number is only going to go up. If you look at, how much we spend on healthcare and the cuts that are coming and to do, more with less, this headwind is only going to get stronger. And if people don't reflect and change course, you're not going to lead a good life and you're not going to succeed and you're going to fail as a leader. And so reflection on building these relationships, putting out in your calendar, and let us help you build this with coaching or framework on how can you change and do this on a daily basis so that you are coming to work and you are doing these relationships based on 50 years of academic research. And this reflection and not doing the same thing that you're doing called insanity every day and expecting different results, especially when the headwinds are going to go up, you're not going to get ahead. And reflection on where you are and where you need to go is going to be so important for any leader of today or any future leader.
Agree. CC, I know this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. So I know you have lots to say on this, but
do we have another week?
How can we make it practical though? How can we help those on the phone and for those that they're going to bring this information back to others? How can they, on a daily basis, how can they make it part of their routine?
So reflection and practice, and just like anything else, you're not going to go run a marathon without at least buying the sneakers and tying them and, walking. And so practice is the key word. Often people are like, I don't have time to pause. I don't have time to reflect. I don't have to. Well, you don't have time not to, right? Because you're wasting time by just this constant iteration. So it is so simple and it's free. And people think that can't possibly be how you do it. It's not hard enough or expensive enough, or it's not in the form of a pill. And the word is breath. If you practice breathing, whether it's one breath before you speak, right, or pick up the phone or type the email, but if you take a deep breath, and when I say deep breath, you start at your piggy toes and you inhale all the way up to the top, and then you exhale it out one time, that calms your autonomic nervous system. And then you can show up in your moment, whether you're leading a healthcare organization or having a conversation with a loved one or deciding if you're going to let that person cut in front of you in traffic. By taking that breath, which is something you could do all day, you do all day, every day, but we do it so unconsciously. That is how you can center yourself, reflect, and allow the moment to show you who you want to be, because you're not being reactive. You're being present.
Absolutely. And the power of that intentional pause is so underestimated and so underappreciated, because just taking those few seconds before you react, before you respond, can mean the difference, between a very positive relationship and an outcome, or a negative one. And it's that few seconds of pause, those few seconds of reflection. So I'm going to exercise our own intentional pause here for a moment. Gail, I want to open it up and see, do we have any questions from the group that we want to address and talk about?
Sure. We have a first question from Stephen. As we lead through ongoing disruption, constant change, and increasing pressure to do more with less, how do you recommend working with leaders who lack humility in order to improve environments in which we operate? Kristen.
Cece, go
So I, for many, 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 many years, was the type of leader that I was very verbal and judgmental about others and how they were showing up. And I am so the opposite of that now. And so I answer your question by saying I show up in the moment or in community with said group by being still, by being present, by being kind, by being compassionate, by being straightforward, by having a loving delivering a hard truth from a place of love. So I don't try to change anyone else. I try to show up in the moment, being that calm, being love. And I'll tell you, it doesn't happen overnight, but one by one, you show up that way and people notice the difference. And then they either migrate away from you because you're energetically not aligned, or they start transforming along with you. And you start attracting new opportunities and relationships because you're coming from that place of wholeness. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
I love
No,
it.
please. Bob, any comments? Any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I read a great book by Dr. Henry Cloud. It's called Necessary Endings. And in there, he talks about there's three types of people in this world. One, there's wise people, there's foolish people, and then there's evil people. So the first thing I would do is assess that person, that leader. Which leader are they, or which person are they? Are they wise? If they're wise, they're going to, you give them the book or show evidence based that leading this way, it could be a better way by building relationships and caring. If they still don't get that, then they're not a wise person. But give them a book, you give them one of our books, it shows leading with love, and then look up Dr. Grain's LMX and building relationships and the results. You'll see results are far better. If they don't get it then, and they still act that way, then they're foolish. There's consequences. So what you have to do, you do your own crew top three, and you start getting results going up, and then you'll be promoted much faster than them, and then sooner or later you're going to be above them, and then they're going to have to listen to you, and that's the consequences. Then there's evil people. There's nothing you could do to change them, and that's through leading with love. You have to have empathy for them, but it's time to get out. It is a necessary ending for you to realize that that leader will never change, and that leader is just, it's time to get out. So that's how I would recommend during these times of changing. First, have empathy, lead with love, help them, guide them, give them the tools, show them the right way, and if they don't lead, or if they're not wise and they don't change, then there's not much you can do.
Thank you, Navy
Thank you
Bob.
both.
Scott?
Gail? No, please go on to the next question.
All right, the next question is from Christopher. You both talked about loving ourselves and knowing our purpose. Kristen, you're going to laugh at that one for me. What is one tool or practice leaders can use to continually reconnect to their purpose when they feel overwhelmed or disconnected? And Cece, I think I'm going to kick this to you first.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this, but the taking a deep breath, when you wake up in the morning, when I wake up in the morning before I rise, I realize I'm awake and I just take a couple deep breaths and I center myself in the moment. When I'm at a stoplight, when I need a breath, sometimes I'm like, I'm going to go to the ladies' room. I don't even have to use the ladies' room. I'm just going to go reconnect with breath. Saying that we don't have time to connect with who we are and why we don't have time not to. Because when we get spinning think about all the stimuli and all the heaviness and that's going on right now. If you don't take the time through breath, right? Walking with nature, going to bed early, spending 10 minutes with someone that you love, reaching out to an old friend. If you don't take the time to do it, your schedule is going to get more insane. So in the beginning, I time blocked it. And I think I talk about it in one of my books. When I first started to meditate, I thought that was the funniest word on the planet. I'm like, who has time to meditate? And my heart rate increased so much because I was so stressed out, because I'm like, I have so much to do. I can't sit here and breathe for 3 minutes. So I took a notepad and a pen, and everything that came up in my mind for those 3 minutes, I wrote it down. I wrote it down just so I could try to find space. You can use an app. There's complimentary apps that help you do this. So there's so many ways that you can fit it in your day. It's a choice. It's a choice. Make the choice.
And the other thing that I think, if I could offer, that helps as well, is to the sense of feeling overwhelmed. It's taking that space to prioritize, because when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, and it's very settling to a team that when you are setting those priorities and giving permission for people to focus on one or two important things, number one, it's very freeing to them because they think that if everything's a priority, they have to juggle and deliver on everything. Whereas if you give them permission to say, I want you to just focus on these two things. Now, that's not to say that because of the environment, your priorities are going to shift. But then if you're going to reprioritize, then instead of adding a third or a fourth to that priority list, I'm going to shift your priorities, but I'm removing these two. And so it really helps, at least in my own experience, when I was able to prioritize and then give permission to the team to focus on those areas. So I know we're coming down to the top of the hour. Before I offer my thanks and gratitude for Bob and Cece for 30 seconds each, if you could leave the group with one key takeaway, one point that you'd want them to go home and think about and maybe put into practice. Cece, let's start with you. What's one thing you would like to ask this group to do in the context of their leadership?
I think it's been a theme for me throughout this conversation, which I'm very grateful you invited me to. Thank you. And I've learned a lot of this in relation with you and Navy Bob, as you know, people who are important to me to know who I am and why I am. So my parting thought is take a deep breath, hang on to it for a second, exhale it out, and allow yourself to get to know yourself and show up. So when it comes to the end of this journey, you're going to look back and be like, I liked me. It's pretty powerful.
I like that. I really like that. Bob, how about you? What are your parting words? What do you want the group to take away?
So if you look at training for an Ironman or a marathon, you can go online right now and you can get a training plan, thousands of training plans. Every day it'll tell you how much to run, how much to bike, how much to swim. Where is your training plan for leadership? Are you just flying by the seat of your pants and being an inbox security person, which all you're doing is answering emails or PowerPoints? If that's the case, reflect, start developing a plan. On Monday, you're going to reach out to these people and you're going to tell them how much they mattered. You're going to, make sure that you're present for the one-on-ones. You're going to look at Dr. Grain's process for doing one-on-ones. You're going to have a script. You're going to make sure that you're using evidence-based. Develop your playbook, just like the crew top three. How often you do in the crew top three? What do you do with that? How often are you doing a one-on-ones? How often you're rounding? And when you round, it's not about a checklist. It's about getting to know people. And it's all about building authentic, caring relationships, trusting relationships to build that environment where people feel empowered, they feel valued, they will do so much more. And that's your biggest engine of any organization. But if you're not detailed, if you're not deliberate on coming up with your minute by minute plan as you're a leader, that is one of the things you can really, really make a difference for in 2026.
Thank you so much. So we are 1 minute shy of the top. First off, I want to thank Cece and Bob. I can't thank you enough for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your friendship with all of us and for being part of this conversation. I also want to thank everybody who joined us today. I believe, and keep me honest, Gail, that this is being recorded and we'll send out the links. I encourage all of you to download and access Cece's books, Navy Bob's books. I'd be honored for you to go out and download my new book, Reflections in Practice. It's free. It's on my website. I think, Gail, your post where we can get all these. But one thing I ask all of you is let's not let the conversation end here today. The future of healthcare, on a personal note, but no matter what your vertical is, the future is really dependent on our future leaders. And especially in healthcare, our true north is our patients. It's delivering the care that they deserve, that they need, but it's delivering it in an environment where those of us who are providers of care can do it feeling fulfilled, feeling engaged, feeling connected. That it's these conversations, in my opinion, are an antidote for burnout, because we cannot continue to lose the resources that we are to deliver the care and be able to deliver the care that we need. So I thank you all. We love hearing from you all. So please reach out to us via email or social media. Again, I think Gail will provide our contacts. We love hearing from you all. And let's keep the dialogue going. So I wish you all a wonderful day, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you for your leadership, Dr. Wolf.
Yeah, thank you,
Bye.
Dr. Wolf. Thank you, everybody. Great to see
Bye,
everybody.
guys.
Bye.